It's the Deck Talking Devil back with you with another video. As promised, every week I'll do a video where I recommend a book, or either I'll present a book that I don't recommend. This week I have a treat in store for you. The book that I wanted to discuss this week, it's right here. It's The Island of Memes, Haiti's Unfinished Revolution by Dr. Wade Nobles. And this is a dandy. If you haven't read this book, I highly recommend it. It's not very expensive. On the back it says 22 bucks. I don't even think I paid that. I think I may have paid about $17 for the book. But I definitely recommend this book. You guys should go out and pick it up. It's worth your time. So, also I want to just kind of interject another book, Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon. And the reason that I'm recommending this book is because it's referenced so much in this one. Okay, so Frantz Fanon, Wretched of the Earth. Highly recommend you pick this book up as well, because it will give context to a lot of things that are brought up in Dr. Wade Noble's book, Island of Memes. So I think that it's very pertinent in the age that we live in now to talk about memes. We use memes all the time now. Whereas 10 years ago, no one would have had any idea what you were talking about if you said a meme. This is a relatively new phenomenon that came about with the eruption of social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Pinterest, Twitter. All of these different sites gave us our introduction to memes, and we see memes used all the time. But in Dr. Wade Noble's book, he uses memes with a pretty strict definition, and I think he even quotes Richard Dawkins in one of his books on evolution, where he describes a meme as an information packet kind of planted in the brain. Now, Dr. Wade Nobles goes a bit further, and he considers a meme as being a symbiotic-reproductive sensorial information structure or packet, or pattern rather, that really encompasses all of the senses and dictates or influences behaviors. So what he's saying, that I kind of unpack that statement, he's saying that there are things that have been embedded in our psyche, and the manifestation of those packets of information are visible in our speech, our behavior, our morals, our values. All of these different things are just manifestation of memes, information packets, symbiotic, meaning that they kind of become one with the host, reproductive, meaning that they pass on from one generation to the next, sensoria, meaning that the senses, touch, taste, sound, feel, all of that influences these information packets to where they manifest in our everyday lives. So that's the kind of the running theme in this book, and he really drives that point home in chapter 3, and then he clarifies it in chapter 4, where he basically draws the correlations to what he's calling memes and what took place at the alligator swamp, the boys Cayman, okay, and the ceremony to Ogun that took place there August 17th or August 14th. So he breaks down this ceremony, and maybe to backtrack, he starts out giving a lot of background information and kind of doing the legwork, laying the foundation before he builds up to what took place at Boaz Cayman. He looks at Hegel. He looks at a lot of different psychologists and sociologists who have been on the record as saying some things pertinent to the conversation that he's having throughout the book. Hegel, primarily because Hegel presents this master-slave dialectic. And I guess to clarify that a bit more, we all know, and if you watch my last video that I did talking about slavery in the Bible, I drew on the fact or emphasized the point that in order to enslave, there had to be this dissonance, this cognitive dissonance that took place in order for the slave master to separate himself from the slave. He had to practice dissonance, and in order to do that, what he used in order to accomplish that was dehumanization. He dehumanized the slave, therefore it gave justification for the slave being a slave. Because if I deemed this individual or this race as being subhuman, not human, I relegated them to property, then I'm justified as having them as slaves, as killing, raping, torturing, burning alive. You know, I can do any of that to them because they're not human. They don't have souls. They're property. Right? So that's how they accomplish this dissonance. So in light of that, Dr. Wade Nobles in The Island of Memes, he goes into what it meant to be human. And he draws upon the saying that to be human, or one becomes self-conscious after he's recognized by the other. Okay, so once your humanity is recognized, then you see yourself as human. So it's reciprocated. All right, when I recognize someone else's humanity, it makes them human. When they recognize my humanity, it makes me human. In Hegel's slave master dialectic, what he's basically presenting is that the master is the one who is recognized without reciprocation. The slave is the one who recognizes without it being reciprocated. So the one who becomes the master is the one whose humanity is recognized. The one who becomes the slave is the one who recognizes the humanity in others, but whose own humanity is not recognized. And so with Hegel's dialectic, here where this slave master dialectic is laid out, and Dr. Wade Noble takes a deep dive into that, and that's around the same time where he brings in Frantz Fanon in this book here, Wretched of the Earth. Now, this book, again, is referenced quite a bit in Dr. Wade Noble's book, The Island of Memes. Okay, because Frantz Fanon deals with what he called, he deals with violence and how violence was used as a threat in order to keep slaves docile and to kind of quell revolts. But he deals with this concept of violence beyond violence, this historical violence, which is basically the threat of violence that uses history as its evidence to substantiate the threat. In other words, you've seen what we did to your ancestors, therefore you stay in line lest the same thing be done to you. So you never really have to experience the violence, but having knowledge of the history of violence is in itself a violent attack against the psyche of the person living currently. So Frantz Fanon deals with that. Dr. Wade Nobles does a wonderful job at interweaving all of these intricate parts and theories and philosophies and things that were laid out leading up to his use of mimetic ideations and mimetic complexes. All of these different things he brings out in this book is just fantastic. He also takes a while to kind of lay out black psychology and the importance of black psychology and how it differs from psychology as a whole, overarching umbrella. How black psychology is needed, is necessary in order to deal with the issues and the mimetic ideations only held by those African descent or Africans themselves, and how that has to be dealt with specifically using certain approaches. It's a lot of information in this book. I would say, and I think that Dr. Wade Noble says this in the introduction, that chapter 4 is the crux of the whole thing. When you read chapter 4, it's where he brings all of these ideals to bear. All right. He revisited the Boys Cayman, the alligator swamp, and the ceremony that took there with Boukman Duty and Cecile Fatima. You know, he talked about Mackendall. He talked about Overture. He talked about Delaney. He talked about all of these different, or Dessalini. He talked about all of these different characters, but he focuses on the ceremony that took place in the alligator swamp and how they were around the fire and they consumed blood, they drank blood, they sacrificed the black pig, they did dances. That was the representation of the snake, the old men with canes and dogs and straw hats smoking on a pipe high represented Papa Legba. How Erzuli was there, Erzuli Dantor, how Dambala was represented, the Simbi, the Loa, all of these different entities that we see that are an intricate part of African spirituality, how they were invoked in order to affect the means inside of the mind of the Africans who were participating in the ceremony, which was kind of like a preface to foreshadowing to the actual revolution. This was the revolution of the spirits, of the minds, to kind of stir up the memes, those information packets that have been passed down from generation to generation, leading them up to the revolution. This was a wonderful job by Dr. Wade Nobles in dealing with the psychology behind all of the different symbols that were used during this revolution. If you ask me, you know, he showed some extensive knowledge in the fields of African spiritual systems and the symbology, going into the term Bo, where we see in the word Mambo, where we see in the word Bokur, where we see in the word Bo and Bokur, Mumbo, all of these different terms, how the word Bo meant power or empowered. And we see the Bokur as one who had knowledge of power. And he it's a lot. It's a lot. But I definitely think that this book is worth reading. I have to try to limit how much time I spend talking because I want to keep these videos very short. And I know some of our attention is not that long. So I think this is a good place to cut it off. If you've read this book, either one of them, let me know your thoughts. Do you recommend them? What are your thoughts on the books? Let me know. I'd love to hear from you. Make sure you hit that like button, share, subscribe, turn on those notifications. So the next time there's a new video, you'll be the first to know. This has been the Dick Talking Devil. Until next time, keep learning, my friend.